Good evening to everybody. Today we have a talk on Dr. S.L. Bhairappa. Today is the 17th day of our series, this English lecture series and lectures on Kannada writers. As we all know, Dr. S.L. Bhairappa is a pan-Indian writer. He is considered as a Punjabi writer in Punjab, Marathi writer in Marathi, and as we all know, there have been seminars, symposiums on his writings in Maharashtra, in Andhra Pradesh, and other places also. Santeshivara Lingannaya Bhairappa actually probes into the human nature. He writes about the sufferings, the joys of human being. That's why he is read all over India, and now he is translated into foreign languages like Russian language also. Uh, so his writings are both artistic as well as philosophical. For example, his uh, Sahitya Academy Award winning novel Datu depicts the caste hierarchy, caste system, or the discrimination based on caste, and all such things. But it is not restricted to the situation in Karnataka or in Dr. Bhairappa's district. It depicts the, it is a kind of representative novel about the caste system. His Parva, of course, is another one very famous novel. Parva is based on Mahabharata, but Dr. Bhairappa has his unique way of uh, giving the his own touch to all the characters. Grihabanga, Avarana. Avarana has a unique technique of a story inside a story. Dr. Bhairappa has his own poetics, how he writes, why he writes, and he has written also about that, about writing Mandra, a novel which mainly has the music. Uh, I should mention here there have been many books, nearly 100 books about Dr. Bhairappa's literature. So I don't go on and on about Dr. Bhairappa. Today's resource person uh, is Sri Arjun Bharadwaj. We have a very young scholar with us today to talk on Dr. Bhairappa. Arjun Bharadwaj is a writer, translator, and a researcher with deep interest in classical literature, arts, and philosophy. An engineer by training, he is well versed in Sanskrit. He is a master's degree holder in Sanskrit. He is well versed in Kannada, of course, English, and more importantly, I should mention here, he is a scholar in German as well as Greek. There may not be many in Karnataka uh, who know Greek language. Of course, classical Greek. Arjun works as a contributing editor of Preksha and is currently studying the comparative aesthetics of classical Greek and Indian arts. He has written and co-written and translated many books and authored over 50 research articles related to science, arts, and philosophy. He enjoys composing poems and plays the Carnatic music also. He is also a visiting faculty at many universities and educational institutions. Arjun Bharadwaj has taught courses and conducted workshops on Natyashastra, uh, Arthashastra, various Puranas, and Sanskrit literature, Indian sciences, and so on. He is interested, and he has studied about temple art, architecture, and iconography. So I think uh, Dr. Bhairappa is lucky to have a, scholar like this to talk on him. Uh, I welcome Sri Arjun Bharadwaj. I also welcome all the members of Kuvempu Bhasha Bharati Pradhikara, all the viewers who have been supporting us by watching the videos later also. I also request you to share the links, Facebook link and the YouTube link to with your friends and other groups you are acquainted with. Once again, I welcome one and all, and I request Sri Arjun to start his talk now. Thank you.
Am I audible, sir?
Yes, yes,
Ajikala.
yes.
Okay. Chidananda Kalamvanim, Vande Chandrakaladharam, Nairmalyata Ratamyena Bimbitam Chittapitishum. Greetings of the day to everyone who has assembled here and everybody who is listening. Firstly, I would like to express my heartfelt gratitude to Sri Ajakala Girish Bhatt and also the Kuvempu Bhasha Bharati for this wonderful endeavor in introducing the stalwarts of Kannada language, the English audience, which will also mean the global audience. So now it's also a great privilege to me to be able to have gotten an opportunity to speak about Dr. S.L. Bhairappa for about 40 to 45 minutes. But then speaking about Dr. S.L. Bhairappa is almost like introducing Dr. S.L. Bhairappa is like introducing an ocean. Like Kalidasa says at the beginning of his Raghuvamsha, Udupe Naspi Sagaram, using a small boat, me, which is a small boat, I'm trying to traverse or cross over or find the depths of an ocean of creativity, an ocean of knowledge, an ocean of values called Dr. S.L. Bhairappa. So a very small personality like me can only try to traverse some amount of the surface. Probably one will require multiple lifetimes to go deep, dive deep within the ocean called S.L. Bhairappa and to unearth, to discover the gems which are hidden in the ocean. So, whatever I can do with my with the limited time I have, I'll try to present the best. Saraswati Samman National Professor Dr. S.L. Bhairappa Santeshivara Lingannaya Bhairappa has inspired and has been read by 4 generations of connoisseurs across the world. Starting from about 1965, when his first masterpiece, the Vamshavruksha, was published, it's been 57 years since then. From then on, right in the Kannada language, it has found 28 reprints. It has been translated into Telugu, Marathi, Hindi, Urdu, English, and Sanskrit languages. And it is still one of the favorites of the Kannada readers, and it is still one of the best-selling novels in the Kannada publication industry. And it is also one of the best-selling novels in the Marathi language as well. So this is a kind of privilege which not many readers, not many writers in any of the world languages have got. Right in their lifetime, they have seen the success of their work, the manner in which their work was appreciated by a generation before them. So when Bhairappa wrote the Vamshavruksha, he was about 31 or 33 years of age. So a generation older to Bhairappa appreciated it. And from the last 57 years, there have been 3 or 4 more generations which have been kind of understanding, appreciating, and loving his works, especially the Vamshavruksha and such other extraordinary masterpieces that he has authored. He ranks only next to Rishi Kavis such as Vyasa, Valmiki, Kalidasa, Homer, and Shakespeare in the literary history of the world. He ranks only with them because of the profound content, the profound creative content that he delivers in each one of his novels, which never lose eye on the philosophy of values. He has captured the minds and hearts of an entire civilization. The entire Bharata, the entire Sanatana Dharma, starting from the from the Vedic age, starting from the Veda Yuga to the Mahabharata Yuga to the Buddhist period, to the period where the Islamic invasions happened, and the period pre-independence, the period post-independence, all of them have been captured by Dr. S.L. Bhairappa in his works, and he has been read and appreciated throughout the geography of India in several multiple languages, and he has been read and appreciated by people all around the world. There's a very famous saying, many people say that Dr. S.L. Bhairappa is a national novelist. He's an Indian, pan-Indian novelist who writes in Kannada. But however, one can also say that he's a global novelist who writes in the Kannada language. He also ranks equal to Vyasa, Valmiki, Kalidasa, Homer, and Shakespeare, also because amongst the several writers that India has had, the world has ever had, his works have been translated to the maximum number of languages, excepting these other stalwarts that I just mentioned, including Sanskrit, Malayalam, Tamil, Sanketi, Telugu, Havyaka Kannada, Hindi, Marathi, Konkani, Odia, Bengali, Punjabi, Gujarati, Assamese, Urdu, all these being Indian languages, English being one of the foreign languages, and Chinese and Russian, into which his novel Parva has recently been translated. His characters are immortal. His words are proverbial. This is a quality, again, I would like to re-emphasize. This is a quality which only the likes of Rushikavis, Vyasa, Valmiki, Homer, Shakespeare, only they have gotten that stature. Another great privilege that Dr. S.L. Bhairappa has as against these stalwarts is that all these translations have happened right during his lifetime, not just translations into other languages. His novels have inspired several other artistic media. They have given their themes, they have been rendered into several other artistic media, including radio plays, audiobooks, stage plays, dance features, films, movies, TV serials, and there have been several documentaries and video features made on Dr. S.L. Bhairappa. All this right during his lifetime. He has not only inspired translation of his works into other languages, his genre of literature has inspired several other literary artists, several other poets and scholars writing in their own medium, writing in their own languages. And it has also inspired several artists coming from different genres of art. So this is a privilege which Dr. S.L. Bhairappa, who in his early 90s, still very strong and healthy, lives on to see the success, the kind of joy that his works have been given to generations of people. Like Dr. Ajakala Girishpat mentioned, the number of books, talks, and documentations and creative appreciations of Dr. S.L. Bhairappa's works outnumber the number of works he has actually authored. There have been over 150 works in Kannada, English, Marathi, and such other languages which talk about his work, which analyze his works, which document his works, which are a kind of creative appreciation of his works. An extraordinary phenomenon that seen to any kind of literary writing. So now to give a very brief biographical information regarding Dr. S.L. Bhairappa. S.L. Bhairappa, who is an embodiment of all positive values, was born in Santeshivara in the Hasan district of Karnataka, the South Indian state. He was born to Sri Lingannaya and Srimati Gauramma couple. So his mother, Srimati Gauramma, had a great emotional, spiritual influence on Dr. S.L. Bhairappa, starting from his youngest of age, starting from his birth, of course, and that has formed the thoughts and that has formed the emotions of Dr. S.L. Bhairappa, like he says from in several of his writings and several of his talks. So from a young age, he was very attached and he was very motivated to engage himself in swimming. Whatever water body he saw in whichever village or whichever town he went, he made it a point to dive down into the water body. He was very good at debates, and he won several accolades. He won several prizes in several debates from his childhood. He had his primary and middle school education in several villages in the old Mysore region of Karnataka, in the Hasan region of Karnataka, starting from Santeshivara, Baguru, Nuggehalli, Gururu, Chennarayapatana, Mysore, etc. These were the places where he had his primary and middle school education. But his life was a life of great difficulties, a life of which posed very untoward circumstances to him. At a very young age, at the age of 8, on the same day, he saw his older sister and his older brother passing away right before his eyes. When he was studying in Bagur in his uncle's house, he heard the news of his mother passing away at the age of 11, and he did not even get a chance to see her mortal remains, and he only heard from a passerby that his mother had passed away. and there were quite other set of difficulties, financial difficulties that he underwent. He worked in various. He had to work very hard to earn his livelihood, to get a bowl of food, and to even to fund his education. At times, he worked at cattle fairs in a tea stall. He sold juices on the streets to pay his education fees. He worked as the gatekeeper of a movie hall, of a movie theater, cinema hall. He enacted dialogues and sung songs and stories from a movie called Chandralekha to earn money, fund his education. He worked as a porter in Mumbai. He also served the horse cart drivers, the Tonga drivers in the Mumbai city. He also sold agarbattis, incense sticks, again to fund his living, to fund his education. Amidst all these traversities, he had this great dedication to Saraswati, to procuring knowledge. So any untoward circumstance, he would use it to his own privilege, and he would make the best use of it, and he would work hard to overcome it. That is what we see. Another very painful incident in his life was that his younger brother, Krishnamurti, passed away, and there was nobody else to even come and do the cremation of the dead body of his younger brother. So he alone carried the mortal remains of his brother to the cremation ground, and he got the body of his brother burnt there. So these are the kind of traversities which Bhairappa underwent. His life is an odyssey from his birth until this point. There have been so many ups and downs in his life. But then, what would happen to most people? Whenever we encounter difficulties, a question usually pops up: why me? Why am I undergoing so many difficulties? And many people have this complaining nature, a cynical nature, or they would feel victimized by circumstances, victimized by people, etc. But time and again, throughout his autobiographical work, throughout his autobiography, which is called The Bitti, Dr. S.L. Bhairappa again and again shows us how whenever there was a difficult circumstance that he underwent, there was a positive ray of hope, a person who always came forward to help him. It could be the Swami Mestru, who lived in Nuggehalli and who took care of him, or it could be Yamunacharya, a very great student of Professor Mysore Hiriyanna. So he was the one who guided him. So any place, any time in his life, whenever he underwent a difficulty, the entire society, in one way or the other, came forward to help him. It could have been his great grandmother Akkaya, who helped him when he was suffering at his uncle's house, etc. So time and again we see that Dr. Bhairappa is not never gets disturbed or never takes the pains that he undergoes to his heart. It inspires his creative zeal. It inspires his motivation to survive. And he also says that the world gives so much of hope, so much of positivity to survive. So his life is a living example. His life itself is something which all of us can try to emulate to the limited extent that we can. So we also get to know that he stood first for the university when he did his intermediate in logic and history from the Maharaja College, Mysore. He procured the MA honors in Greek philosophy and with the special study of Socrates, Plato. He won 2 gold medals during his MA honors. Then in 1958, his teaching career started in Hubli in the Kadu Siddheshwara College. He started teaching. Then he went ahead to become a lecturer of philosophy at the Sardar Patel University in Gujarat. And it was Ranade's student, Ananta Ganesh Javdekar, who inspired him to do a PhD. He wrote his PhD thesis titled Truth and Beauty in just 12 months. In 12 months, he finished writing his thesis, but he had to wait for 2 more years to get the PhD degree awarded from the Maharaja Saji Rao University, Baroda, Gujarat, that awarded him the PhD. Then he moved on to Delhi to the NCERT, National Council of Educational Research and Training. And then while he was away from Karnataka, his native state, he always felt that he's not getting rooted in the culture of Karnataka. He has lost access to the Kannada language, which has been his creative medium of expression. So right from after his after his short career in Delhi, he shifted back to Mysore in 1971. He joined the Regional College of Education in Mysore. So that was briefly his career, and he rose to the level of a professor of philosophy right in Mysore. There have been several creative works that he has authored. So there have been 26 novels that he has authored. There has been one autobiographical work called Bitti that he has authored, and there have been other 7 to 8 non-fictional writings, academic works, a collection of essays on art, literature, philosophy, and what inspires him to write, why he writes, etc. He has captured in several of his other non-fictional writings. So he time and again says that the ultimate purpose, the idea behind any of his writings, any of his creative works, is value evaluation, maulya mimamsa, or analysis of values in a creative manner. So, through his creative works, he first touches upon the emotion of the reader. He captures the emotion of the reader, and then, having entertained the reader, there are some underlying currents of education, underlying currents of value education that his novels provide. Time and again, he says that any literary work must follow the ideal of music. In music, the form is inseparable from content. So it will directly take us to the level of Rasananda. So that should be the ideal of any author, any poet, any literary person, he says. So there have been several awards that that his works have won. In 1975, his work Dhatu won the Kendra Sahitya Academy Award, the Central Sahitya Academy. In 2010, he was awarded the Saraswati Samman for his extraordinary novel called Mandra. In 2015, he got the Sahitya Academy Fellowship. In 2016, he was awarded the Padma Shri. In addition, he has been awarded the honorary doctorate from 7 universities across the world. So, while this is a brief introduction, a brief biographical introduction of Dr. S.L. Bhairappa, we'll just have a brief overview of the kind of themes that are covered in his novels. In fact, the famous statement which goes well with Vyasa's Mahabharata, Yadi hasti tadanyatra, yenne hasti natat kvachita, is also very equally applicable to the works of Dr. S.L. Bhairappa. The different kinds of human relationships, the different kinds of value conflicts, different kinds of interpersonal relationships between a husband and a wife, between the father and a child, between the mother and a child, between a student and the teacher, between one country and the other country, between a boss, a manager, and the employee whom he has employed. All these different kinds of relationships, all the gray shades of life have been very beautifully captured in the works of S.L. Bhairappa. So it is an exhaustive encyclopedia of human emotions and human values, Dr. S.L. Bhairappa's works. So the names of his novels are themselves very suggestive. They have multiple layers of meanings. So with the maturity of the audience, with the maturity of the reader, the names themselves give out layers of meanings. Anandavardhana, who is the author of the Tvanyaloka, an extraordinary work on the theory of suggestion, one of the landmark works on poetics contributed by India to the world, he would have been extremely happy looking at the beautiful names that Bhairappa chooses for his novels. So just to give an overview of the different creative works that Dr. S.L. Bhairappa has authored. So one of his earliest works is the Bhimakaya, which he wrote in 1952 at the age of 18 when he was in his junior intermediate, which is equivalent of the first PUC, first pre-university college in Karnataka today. So the Bhimakaya itself shows the beginnings of a genius, the beginnings of an extraordinary creative artist. So in the Bhimakaya, although today, looking at his other novels, it might look like one of the earliest ones and not so profound ones, although one might think that way. But still, he has captured certain ideas, certain thoughts, which he wouldn't have practically experienced at his age, at the age of 18. So that shows his prajna chakshu or his pratibha chakshu. Through his talent, he could imagine situations, he could imagine relationships, he could imagine emotions which he would not have directly experienced. So we see the beginnings of a giant of a scholar, a giant of an artist, right from the Bhimakaya. Then his other prominent novel, which came a few years after that, about 9 years after Bhimakaya, was Dharmashri, which largely focuses on the Christian missionaries which convert the Hindus, making some kind of fake promises and the kind of societal effects it has, etc. The major work, the masterpiece, one of the first masterpieces that Dr. S.L. Bhairappa has authored is the Vamshavriksha, which was published in 1965. Like I said, all his works are based on Maulya Mimamsa. That is the ultimate goal that he's trying to make. He doesn't give any kind of judgment in his novels. He doesn't give a very black and white statement. He doesn't make them. Through his characters, he tries to make us introspective. So this is the nature of this particular person. That is the nature of that other particular person. So these are the situations they encounter, and this is the result they end up with. So it is for us to go through it. First of all, enjoy the story. After having enjoyed, it will take us to a deep level of introspection. If a person is honest, if a person is introspective, then his novels themselves can shape our personality. They can shape our minds. They can shape our behavior. So the Vamshavriksha, it captures very creatively the conflict between certain ancient traditional beliefs and freedom from certain practices. It also addresses questions such as the widow remarriage and questions such as who does his child belong to? Does it belong to its paternal lineage? Does it belong to both its parents, the mother and the father? Does it belong to the seed which caused its birth? Or does it belong to the womb which nurtured it for 9 months? Where does the child belong to? Or is the child an independent entity which belongs to the society, or it has its freedom to explore the entire society itself? A very, very profound work written by Dr. S.L. Bhairappa in his early 30s. So he also analyzes companionship, a kind of companionship that one can experience through a ritualistic marriage. Another kind of companionship that one can experience through intellectual compatibility or emotional compatibility. So, what is marriage after all? So, that is another very intricate question he tries to address in the Vamshavriksha. Then he also analyzes what is real progeny? What is a real child? Is a biological child the real child? Or is an emotional child the real child? Or an intellectual child the real child? So, what is the ultimate thought or ultimate conception of progeny? That is another thing that he explores in his Vamshavriksha. And the impressions of purity of lineage, impurity of blood, etc., are very ephemeral, and they do not have any absolute value. So that is what the novel also leads to. His other novel, Nai Neralu, it throws light upon rebirth and what would be the societal or the emotional status of person who recollects or who appears to recollect the memories of his previous birth. A very interesting, a mystical a novel having certain mystical dimensions, the Nai Neralu. There is this another fantastic novel called The Jalapata, which itself means waterfall, which was authored by him in about 1967. It shows the life of an artist in a natural atmosphere and in a controlled atmosphere. The life of an artist and the life itself in an artificial atmosphere and in a natural atmosphere. So it also throws light upon the conflicts in thought between the natural process of birth versus very selectively producing very fit progeny. See, for it in fact analyzes in a oblique manner Darwin's theory of the survival of the fittest. So a character called Nadagowda who comes there, he wants progeny to be he wants only the fittest of people to survive. So he makes his best of his efforts to make sure that his wife gets impregnated by the best of the semen and not through him, because he himself believes that he has a weak genetic factor. He has weak genes, so he doesn't want weak children to be born. So he wants to synthetically make the next generation of the population to be physically and emotionally strong. So these kinds of conflicts, if the natural birth process is that valid, or this artificial process of birth, what stands the test of time, etc. In the Tabbalu Neenade Magane, another very beautiful novel which has been translated into English by Sri Sandeep Balakrishna as Orphaned, he delineates the story among several of the different characters. A person called Kalinga Gowda, who is orphaned, who becomes orphaned because of non-adherence to values which are native to that particular place and that particular soil, to that spatio-temporal values. So when you don't adhere, when you don't get along with the society, when you don't get along with the traditional beliefs or the ecosystem that a society provides you, obviously you'll feel emotionally orphaned. You'll feel spiritually orphaned. You'll feel that there is nobody for you. So it also throws light upon whether we'll have to, whether man should think of himself as being at the top of the pyramid, top of the pyramid of creation, and everything underneath him is for his own exploitation. Should the cows be only made for the utility of human beings? Should man kind of derive material utility out of everything, be it the cows, or it would be it the grazing lands, or be it the forests or the waters of a river? Is it only for his material utility, or is there any other sense of sacredness, sense of emotional value attached with all of these objects? Should man be very exploitive on everything else, or should he also have a sense of being submitting himself to all the natural forces? So that's another question that he tries to answer here. So a very simple case. In several of the temples, we have these water bodies called the Kalyani. The waters of the Kalyani are meant for the Abhisheka of the deity, and it is kind of a sacred water body. So this body of water, which is said to be sacred, which is ritualistically used, can it be used as a swimming pool for one's own physical pleasure, or should one keep it aside as a sacred unit? Is there any place for sanctity or sacredness in one's life, or should everything be exploited for one's own utility? So that's another thing that he tries to explore there. And in the Tabbalu Neenade Magane, yet another feature is that there is a conflict of values between India and the West that itself is kind of metaphorically shown by the marriage of Kalinga to a Western lady called Hilda. So when both of them start living in their native village, they see that there are quite a number of untoward circumstances that they encounter, and some of the things which they cannot relate to, and the people there cannot relate to them. So the conflict of the West and the Eastern values, that itself is kind of metaphorically told by the marriage of Kalinga and his wife Hilda. So the sentiment that the Indians have towards the cow, and the kind of utilitarian value only that the West sees from cows, that is very beautifully shown there. And in many of these works, Dr. S.L. Bhairappa uses several of the Puranic stories very creatively. So there is this story of Chavana, which comes in the Tabbalu Neenade Magane. There is the story of Arundhati and Vasishtha, which comes in another novel of his Dhatu, where the characters quote these stories to either establish a point or to establish a certain value. So the benefit of using these Puranic stories is that the Puranas have captured the minds and hearts of the entire Bharatiya civilization, the entire Bharatiya ethos for over 5,000 years. So as soon as we tell a Puranic story, that itself triggers a kind of thought, a kind of idea, a kind of emotional feeling. It also triggers a certain value. So he very creatively intersperses these Puranic stories into his novels. And the mother cow is personified as that mute entity which understands and feels everything but does not react. That is also metaphorically shown in the character of Kalinga's mother, Tayava, who can hear but who cannot speak. A very, very beautiful novel. In fact, at the beginning of his Tabbalu Neenade Magane, Dr. S.L. Bhairappa says that if the region in which the entire story takes place, which is Karnataka, if the region is changed to any other state of India, still the story, the kind of conflict, the kinds of emotions that people undergo, that will still remain valid. It's only the spatio-temporal, especially the spatial component, is only for convenience that he has chosen Karnataka. So this kind of phenomenon in that particular period of time, which is early independence kind of period, that is valid everywhere around India. So the same kind of emotions, the same kind of situation would have been found throughout this Bharata, throughout this country of India. So he kind of suggestively tells that. So by saying this, he shows this statement itself shows how Sadharani Karana is achieved in this novel. So that is why when a novel like Tabbali Neenadamagini or Jalapata or another novel called Datu, when it is translated into another language, such as the Punjabi, Marathi, Gujarati, or Hindi, or Tamil, or Telugu, the people of that particular region, they feel that it is their own because it is purely Bharatiya in its spirit, purely true to the emotions. The truth of the emotions is the beauty of literature. That is what Bhairappa again and again mentions in several of his non-fictional writings. In his other work, another small work, not as huge as several other works of his, a small work called Nirakarana, he discusses or evaluates what is an attachment, how do we develop detachment, is escapism same as getting detached. So he also shows very figuratively that only if you have the capacity to swim against the currents of the world, only then can you raise to the heights of detachment. In fact, there is this character called Narahari who appears in the novel Nirakarana. He feels that the society has cornered him into certain kind of circumstances, and he wants to do away with all his 5 children that he has got, and he tries to give them away in adoption with a false sense of celibacy, with a false sense of sannyasa. So what is real sannyasa? What is real detachment? That is very creatively examined in his novel Nirakarana. Another refrain that comes throughout Nirakarana is that man is responsible for his own actions and he cannot blame anyone else for it. See, this is what several of us we do in our own lives. We might have seen our own family members who do it or our own friends who do it. For the decisions they make, they start blaming the external world or the several external societal parameters. But here in the Nirakarana, Dr. S.L. Bhairappa very convincingly shows how one is responsible for his own actions, for his own life circumstances. One cannot blame an external entity there. In fact, here in the novel Nirakarana, we see that Narahari, who wants to abandon his family, he successfully, to some extent, abandons his children and goes to the peaks of Himalayas, thinking that he would have that is the way of attaining sannyasa, or that is the manner in which detachment can be achieved. Then, having gone there, the solidified snow there, which where there is loss of dynamism, there is no dynamism itself. So there is no sense of space and time. Everything looks the same. Everything appears the same. So there he feels that he doesn't belong there. The snow itself, which is the static samatva, the tranquility, the state of tranquility, he feels he does not belong there, and he comes down from the Himalayan mountains. The imagery of mountains, the imagery of water bodies, the imagery of forests, the imagery of trees, etc., which Bhairappa brings about in his novels, that is something which these natural elements is something what Bhairappa has loved from his youngest of his days. From his, he had once traveled until Sringeri on foot. He had walked for about 35, 40 kilometers on foot and reached Sringeri amidst forest, amidst a very thick forest. So that is the first instance where he got attracted to all these natural resources, this nature, etc. And all of them come as beautiful metaphors in his work. In fact, Sri Shashikiran has written an article about how mountains come as very beautiful metaphors in the works of S.L. Bhairappa. And I, as per under the guidance of Dr. Shatavadani R. Ganesh, I also happen to write a work where an article in which we highlight upon how water bodies become metaphorical elements, how they symbolize different kinds of values, different kinds of emotions in the works of S.L. Bhairappa. So this is Nirakarana. Then quickly, I have got very little time apparently. There is this other very beautiful novel called Datu, which itself translates to crossover, or it can also mean a bridge, or it can also mean to transcend. It discusses the issues between different castes, the perceived superiority or the perceived inferiority of the different castes in India, how each caste wants to consider itself to be superior than the others or wants to reach a superior status, etc. And how this entire illusion pertaining to caste that can spoil relationships, that can have kind of problems in the society. There could be some elements in the society who use the caste system to their advantage, for their material advantage, for their economic advantage, for their political advantage, etc. All of these have been beautifully brought out in the Datu novel. So it's very ironical. There are some elements in the novel which, at the surface level, look comical, but there's a deep irony underlying all of them. And towards the end of the novel, it's shown in a very beautiful manner. There is an entire Prabandha Dhwani that comes through the novel of Datu, where he shows that transcending the caste, whatever these equations, ups and downs, greater and lesser equations, can only happen through philosophical realization. Any amount of physical attempts, financial attempts to overcome the caste system is not possible. Only when one realizes that Satchidananda Tattva, that is when one can overcome all these the illusions connected with the superiority or inferiority of birth. So that's about Datu. His magnum opus is Parva. Parva is a retelling of the Mahabharata, Vyasa's Mahabharata. While retelling the Vyasa's Mahabharata, Dr. S.L. Bhairappa has not compromised on the philosophical output of Vyasa. He has captured the spirit of Vyasa very beautifully, but while in his novel Parva, he has removed all the supernatural, mystical dimensions. So he writes that only when the supernatural and mystical elements are kept aside, the underlying human nature will be revealed. See, if we conceive Krishna as somebody who has got extraordinary powers anyway, we might be missing out the human aspect of Krishna. Similarly, of Arjuna or of Bhima, etc. There are these emotional layering which he uses to give out those emotional layering and the different kinds of perspectives that the people in the Mahabharata period have. He uses this technique called the stream of consciousness, where he explores and dives deep into the thoughts and emotions of the different characters who come in the Mahabharata. See, a very simple example, the approach of Arjuna and Bhima towards fighting a war is very different. So Bhima thinks, what is a war after all? I'll just have to take my mace, my gada, and I just barge into this battlefield and I'll just start smashing one enemy after the other. So that is the best kind of war strategy. What does Bhima also thinks? Who is this? My brother, younger brother Arjuna, he's so useless. He wants to stand at a very far distance and he wants to shoot only one arrow at a time. This is not manly. So manly kind of warfare is where we dive into the enemy forces and start smashing one after the other. But Arjuna, his own thought is that, see, the approach of Bhima is like a beastly animal. It's very crude. What is the real Kshatriya Tattva? You must have some kind of strategy. You must have some kind of planning. You must develop techniques. You must train yourself. You must identify the strongest of the enemies that you have and first attack them, first defeat them, first weaken them. So without being judgmental, Bhairappa tries to explore the emotions of these different characters, the approaches they have towards towards the life. So while talking about Parva, Shatabdani Dr. R. Ganesh, another literary giant of Karnataka, he has called Dr. S.L. Bhairappa as proud of Vyasa. So there is this poet called Kumara Vyasa, who has got his own beautiful retelling in poetic Kannada language. But while he is Kumara Vyasa, the author of Parva, Dr. S.L. Bhairappa, is proud of Vyasa, a very senior, a very matured kind of Vyasa in a sense. So the Parva itself, Mahabharata itself, is a Sandhi Kala, it's a Yuga Sandhi Kala, where two different time periods meet. There's a first Yuga Sandhi Kala where the Treta Yuga ends and the Dwapara begins, and another Yuga Sandhi Kala, a meeting of two periods of time where the Dwapara ends and the Kali Yuga begins. So that is where these conflict of emotions happen, conflicts of values happen. So that is the kind of analysis that Bhairappa does. Wherever there's a conflict of values or emotions, he uses that as the raw material for his creative elaboration. So one other question that he discusses in many of his novels is that, does birth have an ultimate value? Does how we are born, does that reflect upon our personality, or should we judge a person from the manner in which he is born, or should we see how a person leads his life after he is born, or should we just make different kinds of distinctions just based on the manner in which he is born? See, ultimately, we cannot control how we are born, who our parents are, in which particular place we are born, and with what gender we are born. But what we are in our life is what is ultimately under our control. See, throughout the Parva, inspired by Vyasa, Bhairappa shows how Duryodhana and the Kauravas are judging the Pandavas just based on their birth. So Duryodhana says quite explicitly in the Parva that the Pandavas are not really Pandavas. They are not the biological children of Pandu. They are Kaunteyas and Madreyas. They are biological children of Kunti and Madri, born to the sperm of different men. So therefore, since they don't share any blood with the Kauravas, they do not have any right to ask for a share of the kingdom. So this is the conflict with which the entire novel starts. So this, a very small verse, a half of a verse, which comes in the Mahabharata, in Vyasa's original Mahabharata, that has inspired an entire thought process in the novel Parva, like we can see. And the entire novel of Parva is almost an analysis of different purusharthas, dharme charte cha kame cha mokshe cha bharatarshava, yadi hasti tadanyatra, yenne hasti natat kvachata. The novel Parva stands as a testimony for this, where he, in a more human level, removing all the mystical elements, Bhairappa analyzes these purusharthas, dharma, artha, kama, and moksha. Very interestingly, in his novel Parva, he doesn't attempt to even explore the mind of Krishna. Krishna, who is the Paramatma, who is Nirguna, Nirakara, he is all pervading, all inclusive. So Krishna is perceived by different people in different ways, but then to understand the heart of Krishna or the mind of Krishna, one should be Krishna. No other person can understand him in his in the complete holistic manner. So with that, that is the dhvani, that is the suggestion that Bhairappa brings through his parva. So there are other very beautiful elements that we see in his novel. There are other novels such as Nele and Sakshi. While Nele examines life at the brink of death, Sakshi analyzes life from after death. So while that Preta of Parameshwaraya is in Yamaloka, he looks back at his life and analyzes. So we'll have to go beyond whatever we are. We have to go beyond the boundaries to get a proper perspective of our own lives. So from that door of death, or from beyond death, when we look at life, we'll get a proper perspective of our own nature, our own values, our own behavior in the world. There's this other novel called Anchu, which is a genre in itself, which has been put forth by Bhairappa. It's a very unique kind of work, a very slow-moving work, which zooms in to the emotion of the lead character, who is named Amrita, but then she again and again tries to commit suicide, tries to end her life. Although her name itself is Amrita, which itself means no death, non-death, she again and again tries to commit suicide, etc. So a very interesting one. There's this another, the biggest in the number of pages, a novel by Dr. S. L. Bhairappa, which he authored in 1993, called Tantu. So it can in fact be called the modern day Mahabharata. There in Tantu, he analyzes several problems, several issues the world is facing, starting from the theft of idols in the temple, the donations were made to temples or other societal institutions, other institutions which help the society. He also analyzes the fall of values, the fall of dharma, when the nation is seized by an autocratic ruler. In this case, it's Indira Gandhi. So he analyzes the times or the emotions and the values of people of India during the time of emergency, which happened between 1975 and 1977. He also analyzes the values in journalism, the education system, traditional education versus modern education, co-education, where boys and girls together study or together inhabit in a hostel, and another kind of education where only there is a separate school for boys and a separate school for girls. So he also analyzes corruption and bribery, which happens at different levels in human nature. And he also analyzes industrial life of an industrialist, life of teenagers, life of students, the state of traditional gurukulas, the state of traditional purohits, and the values of a musician, the relationship between the music guru and a student, etc. And he also slightly touches upon homosexuality in his work, the beginnings of homosexuality between Kanti and Sheetal. Although it's not made very explicit, there are some underpinnings there. So the relationships within a marriage and relationships outside a marriage, all of these are touched upon in Tantu. Although the work itself is about 30 years old, now we are in 2022, and the work was written in 1993, and it narrates the incidents of 1975 around that period. But still, it is very relevant today. Even today, we can relate to several of the emotions, several of the conflicts, several of the values that he throws light upon that. Sartha, another very important novel. It's a peep into India of the 7th and 8th centuries. It almost has this feature of telescopic imaging. So, what was the status of people there? What was the status of different drama troupes? What is the status of different philosophers, different kinds of ritualistic practices that were found in India back then? Mandra, which is another very important work, which won him the Saraswati Samman, that throws light upon the contrast between the experience of Rasananda while we enjoy a piece of music and or a piece of dance versus the life of the very same artist, which could be very ugly, which could be very disgusting. While we watch a beautiful piece of art, we are in that state of ecstasy. But when we get associated with the same artist who has created that piece of art, we might feel very disgusted. What is this contradiction? From where does this contradiction arise? Several of the characters whom we encounter in these novels, they are almost like immortal. Even today, when I have conversations with several of my friends, several of my seniors, if I just say you're behaving like Katyayini, so the person will understand what I'm referring to, what ideas, what values, what personality traits I'm referring to. If I say that you're behaving like a Manjaya, Manjaya is one of the primary characters who comes in the work called Sakshi. There again, S.L. Bhairappa says, what is karma? What is desire? It is the concretized form of our own ego is desire. So there are several such proverbial statements that he makes throughout his novels, and there are several such immortal characters that he has created. Just like when we utter the word Rama, Bhagavan Sri Rama, all of us can relate to the personality traits and the values that were represented by Rama. Similarly, the characters of Bhairappa immediately have an appeal on the reader, and they become immortal, they become proverbial, they become metaphors for different things. So there are very interesting elements that we come across in Mandra. The reading of the novel Mandra is an experience in itself. It cannot be captured in one or two words. It's almost like undergoing or experiencing the rendition of a Darbari Kannada raga, where one becomes deeply introspective, deeply contemplative. And at the same time, there is some kind of joy, some kind of melancholy. All of them come together when we go through the work Mandra. There are a couple of other works, Avarana, which has again been translated into English by Sandeep Balakrishna. It's a very creative work in the sense that instead of narrating history in the form of facts, it shows the values of history very beautifully. It has elevated history from being factual to being value based. So it shows the hypocrisy of the leftists, the communists, etc., in the contemporary society, and the same kind of hypocrisy which existed during the Mughal period, during the period of etc. Another very landmark contribution that with great amount of courage and with great amount of commitment to truth that S.L. Bhairappa has written, how the very word Avarana, among several other meanings that it has, it kind of suggestively says how truth has been clouded, truth has been masked because of our own selfish motives, and unveiling of the truth is what he tries to do through his work. And there is this other work called Yana, where he examines what would be the status of the oaths, the vows, etc., which are taken on earth, the kind of mental makeup that we have on Earth, the vows that we have taken on Earth, do they still remain valid when we go away from the solar system, when we are removed from the solar system physically? Spatially, we are removed from our native soil to the laws, the values which are applicable on Earth. Today, are they applicable even outside the solar system? That is something he's examining there. While in Sakshi or Nile, there's a temporal change. So there is this death that one is going to through time. Here, one is spatially dead from Earth. He has gone physically away from that planet called Earth. So, in the framework of what could look like a space travel or a space odyssey, there's a very deep spiritual inquiry that Yana does. It's one of its kind novel in the Kannada language. Although there are several such novels in the English and other foreign languages, the kind of philosophical truths which Yana attempts to analyze are very phenomenal. And Uttarakanda, being his latest or the last novel that he has authored so far, which was released in about 2017, it analyzes the entire story of Ramayana through Sita's perspective. Sita returning to the soil after she has been sent away by Rama to the forest. She returning to the soil literally as an agriculturist. So there also he uses the flashback technique, the stream of consciousness, etc. And he also brings about this very beautiful point towards the end of the novel, where he justifies the reason or he analyzes the reason for Valmiki composing, Maharshi Valmiki composing the great epic Ramayana. Dr. S.L. Bhairappa shows that probably Valmiki wanted to give a proper perspective, an objective perspective to Rama by showcasing his own life, Rama's own life, right in front of him as a poetic work, as a literary work, as a dramatic work. So when we are distanced with our own life events by time, and when we start seeing our own work as our own life as an artistic thing or as a poetic thing, that potentially can probably help Rama rethink, or that can potentially probably unite Rama and Sita. So it was probably with that intention that Valmiki wrote the entire epic of Ramayana. So that is another thing that Bhairappa brings about in his novel Uttarakanda. There are quite a number of autobiographical autobiographical novels written by S.L. Bhairappa, which include Gruhabanga, Anveshana, Durasaritaru, and a few others where several of the autobiographical elements occur. In fact, Dr. S.L. Bhairappa says that any creative work of art is, in its essence, autobiographical, in the sense that whatever the author has actually experienced, the kind of ups and downs in life, the kind of emotional landscape that the author has lived, that will come into the novel in one way or the other. So every novel is, in one sense or the other, very autobiographical, he says. And to write all of these novels, he prepares himself quite well, very adequately, very thoroughly. So there have been essays called how we wrote Mandra. What were the kind of preparation he undertook to write the novel Parva, and what are the steps of preparations that he undertook to write the novel Mandra, etc. So for each one of them, he does a very thorough research before writing them, and his scholarship does not come about very prominently. It's hidden behind the creative layer. So there is this undercurrent of scholarship which is covered by the creative forefront that it has. So there is the other work called Bitti, like I said, which is itself an autobiographical, which is a literal autobiography, very inspiring, which can motivate several different people. The works of Bhairappa, there have been quite a number of creative commentaries written on his works, creative appreciations written on his works. The works of Srimati Professor L.V. Shantakumari are landmark works on the works of S.L. Bhairappa. Shatavadani Dr. R. Ganesh has spoken extensively on the works of Dr. S.L. Bhairappa. The recordings are available online in the Kannada language, and he has also written quite a few articles on the work. So they are definitive works of vimarsha or analysis of these of the works of S.L. Bhairappa. I have, because of paucity of time, I have not touched upon the non-fictional works of S.L. Bhairappa, but then the theory that he puts forth in the non-fictional work, they are non-fictional works of his, they are found in practice in the creative works of creative novels that he has written. So one need not discuss them exclusively. So all of them have come about creatively in the novels that he has written. So he has not only captured the minds and hearts of scholars, of different creative people, but he has also captured the hearts of the common folk of the entire state of Karnataka and the entire country of India. So there are these compilations based on his works and based on the experiences of reading his works. The compilations made by Srimati Vijaya Haran, such as the Namma Bhairappanavaru, where how common men have felt that Bhairappa is their own, how the common men have felt that uh, there have been life changing experiences for everyone as they go through the works of Bhairappa. So that's one of such works. There's this other work in English called The Jain Genius Bhairappa, a mirror of his novels, where the different people who have adapted the works of Bhairappa into different artistic mediums, be it the radio plays or the stage plays or the movies or different kinds of TV serials that have come about, they have documented their experiences. And different translators have also documented their experiences with Bhairappa as a person and Bhairappa as seen through his works. One other thing is that while in Mandra, Bhairappa throws light upon the contradiction between an artist and his work of art. How like I already mentioned, the piece of art may be really elevating, but then the life of the artist may be really disgusting. This contradiction, fortunately, does not exist in the life of Bhairappa. He lives by the values that he has always spoken about, that he has always put forward. There's no dichotomy between his works and his life. His life itself is a masterpiece. So people like me who have had the privilege to be very closely associated with him, we every time any kind of conversation with Dr. S.L. Bhairappa is extremely insightful, extremely elevating, something which we kind of recollect and think about and introspect for quite a number of months, quite a number of years. One conversation with him can be food for thought for a lifetime, in fact. Now, because this is a session in English, and the idea was to introduce Bhairappa, Dr. S.L. Bhairappa and his works to the English reading audience, I would also like to throw light upon the works of his which have been translated into the English language as per the request of the organizers. So Vamshavriksha has been translated as The Uprooted by Dr. K. Raghavendra Rao. Vamshavriksha has also been translated by Bhairappa himself along with Sushma Chandrasekhar. The first translation was in 1992. The second one was in 1995. Tabaliyu Ninade Magane has been translated as Orphaned by Sandeep Balakrishna. Gruhabanga has been translated with the same title, with a subtitle called A Broken Home by Srimati L.V. Shantakumari. Datu was first translated as Crossing Over, with the title Crossing Over, by Dr. Pradhan Gurutatta and David Mowat. And it was again an upgraded edition of the Datu translation, came about it was published in 2017, translated by Dr. Pradhan Gurutatta and Professor L.V. Shantakumari. Parva, A Tale of War, Peace, Love, Death, God and Man was the translation of the Kannada original by Dr. K. Raghavendra Rao. Sakshi, The Witness, was translated by Bhairappa, Dr. S.L. Bhairappa himself, and the editing was done by Sharon Norris. It was first published in the year 2000. The Sakshi was again translated into English by Professor L.V. Shantakumari. It was published in 2017 by the Niyogi Books. The Anchu was translated with the title Brink by Sri R. Ranganath Prasad. It was published in 2020 by the Niyogi Books. Tantu was translated as Tantu, The Loom of Life by Dr. S. Ramaswamy. It was published by Niyogi Books in 2011. Sartha was also translated by Dr. S. Ramaswamy. Sartha, The Caravan. Mandra was translated by Dr. S. Ramaswamy and Professor L.V. Shantakumari. The first edition was published in 2006. Avarana was translated as Avarana the Wheel by Sandeep Balakrishna, and it was published in 2014. And the translation itself has found multiple editions in the last 8 years since its publication. Uttarakanda was translated by Rashmi Terdal, and it was first published in 2020. And upon the request, upon the perusal of Dr. S.L. Bhairappa, I personally had the privilege to translate Yana, his novel, into the English version, Yana, The Voyage. It was published by the Subbu Publications in 2021. So with this, I would like to come to the end of my brief presentation on the life and the works of Dr. S.L. Bhairappa. In fact, the words which the shloka, the verse which applies to uh, Vyasa kind of applies to Bhairappa also, I would say. There's this very famous verse, Achutur Vadano Brahma, Dvibahu Raparo Harihi, Abhala Lochana Shambhu, Bhagavan Badarayana. One can also change the last pada as Bhagavan Bhairava Vidaha or Bhairapposo Mahakavihi, Abhala Lochana Shambhu, Bhairapposo Mahakavihi or Bhagavan Bhairava Vidaha. Dr. Russell Bhairappa, is like Brahma, the creator. Although he doesn't have four faces, he exemplifies the creator with his creative genius. He only has two hands, but he's like an other Hari. He's like Bhagavan Narayana. He helps for the sustenance of the world. As in, when you go through his novels, it gives you a deep sense of confidence that nothing is impossible, nothing is difficult in life. Everything can be digested, and we'll get the strength to encounter all different kinds of emotions and circumstances in life. Abhala Lochana Shambhu, Shambhu, Shiva, who dissolves the world, Bhairappa, through his works, has tried to remove all the disillusionment, all the different kinds of illusions that people might have. He tries to dissolve all the baser values, all the baser tendencies that mankind can have. So it's our privilege that we live in the same soil, in the same times as genius like Dr. S.L. Bhairappa. With this, I would like to conclude my talk, and I would like to express my heartfelt gratitude once again to Kuvempu Bhasha Bharati, Dr. Ajikala Girish Bhatt, and all the other team members who have come forward to organize these talk series. Namaste.
Thank you, Sri Arjun. Kuvempu mentions about three kinds or three forms of criticism. Of the three forms of criticism, he says that the one which is philosophical is the best one. But as we all know, criticism to be philosophical, the work of art also should have such a content, such a stuff in it. Every work of Dr. S.L. Bhairappa has such a content. You can analyze the philosophical and artistic aspects of Dr. Bhairappa's works, or each work for hours together. Dr. Bhairappa started to write in 1950s. Of course, his major works started to come during 1960s, like Vamshavriksha and all. From the beginning itself, he was swimming against the current, so to say. The Navya literary movement was very famous then, but Dr. S.L. Bhairappa did not join that. He stood on his own grounds because he had a strong reading of Indian aesthetics, Bharatiya Kavya Mimamsa. So he was not after that existentialism or Marxism or some such isms. Of course, Bhairappa's works contain all those aspects, as Arjun Bharadwaj has rightly mentioned about the problem of caste and how we should overcome that. All these aspects Dr. Bhairappa has touched in his various novels, especially Dhatu. He brings this problem very artistically, of course. Bhairappa also responds to the situations. He responds with this straightforward responses. He does not shy away. He does not, depend on politically correct narratives. So, therefore, I know one cannot say anything about Bhairappa in just 45 or 60 minutes. Therefore, I know the time period we gave to Arjun is much less or not at all enough. But at the same time, I believe that Arjun has reminded the viewers many dimensions of Dr. Bhairappa's novels. Many of you will reread the works of Bhairappa with this background of Arjun's talk and with the new light Arjun has thrown on the novels of Dr. Bhairappa. I thank profusely Arjun Bharadwaj and all the viewers, all the members of Kuvempu Bhasha Bharati Pradhikara who all have been supporting me, and our registrar Sri Ishwar Mirji. Once again, I thank you all. I request all of you to be with us tomorrow at 7 p.m., wherein Professor Vinayak Naik, Dr. Vinayak Naik from Dharwad will talk on Baswaraj Kattimuni, a well-known writer from northern Karnataka region. So I request all of you again to be with us. I also request you to share the links for the talk of tomorrow, and wishing you all good night. I quit. Thank you.